The land was not empty. It only seemed that way to men who measured wealth in fences and plowed furrows, to the fools who rushed across it, their eyes fixed on the promise of gold or green valleys further west. It was a wasteland, a great brown. Nothing to be endured. But the land was full. It was full of a wind that never stopped talking, a high, keening voice that scraped the nerves raw or sang a man to sleep. It was full of a sky so large it pressed down on you, a blue so deep it hurt the eyes, and at night, it was a blanket of black velvet so thick with stars it felt like you could reach up and grab a handful. This was the High Lonesome, the great American desert, somewhere west of the wide Missouri and east of the jagged spine of the mountains. The year was 1873. A man with a new derby hat and a head full of dreams would call it a frontier. He would use words like manifest and destiny. He would speak of taming it, of bringing civilization to the savage. He would see only what he wanted to see space to be filled, resources to be taken. For the people, it was simply home. It had been home for more generations than there were stars. They did not see a wasteland. They saw a pantry, a church, a library. They knew the bitter taste of the sagebrush and the sweet water hiding beneath the dry sand of an arroyo. They knew the paths of the deer and the habits of the pronghorn. They knew the language of the hawk and the silence of the owl. Or they had. Now, the land was full of ghosts. The great herds of buffalo were gone, replaced by bone pickers and mountains of bleaching skulls waiting for the railroad. The railroad, that was the iron snake that cut the world in half, bringing the noisy, hollow men from the east, bringing the telegraph wires that hummed with a magic Keona did not trust. Keona moved through this changed land like a phantom, a smudge of motion against the vast backdrop of pale earth and paler sky. She was of this place. Her skin was the color of the dry earth, her black hair a piece of the night sky pulled down and braided. She rode a paint mare, a tough, wiry animal with mismatched eyes and a disposition as thorny as Keona's own. The horse, Sparrow, knew the subtle language of her knees, the shift of her weight. They moved as one creature, two parts of a single, grieving whole. Keona was a woman, but that was a softness she had packed away, buried deep like a winter cache she might never return to. She was, first and last, a warrior. The last, she was the only woman warrior of the Silent Arrow band left breathing. The only one. That fact was a cold stone lodged beneath her heart. It was a truth she woke with every morning and a nightmare she rode with every night. She was the last to see the smoke, the last to hear the screams echo off the canyon walls at Willow Creek. It had been a dawn attack, not a battle, a massacre. The blue-coated soldiers had come in winter, when the snow was deep and the ponies weak. They had come with their long knives and their repeating rifles, their bugle call a shriek of brass that had ripped the frozen morning air. She remembered the smell of burning hide and hair. She remembered the sound the canvas lodges made as they collapsed in fire. She remembered her brother, his face a mask of surprise before he fell. She remembered her mother, dragging her by the arm toward the frozen creek bed, shoving her into the icy water beneath an overhang of snow. "Stay," her mother had commanded, her voice not a shout, but a terrible, quiet hiss. "Be silent, live." After a long silence, Keona, with a voice full of sorrow and anger, continues Keona had lived. She had hidden in that freezing water for 3 hours, listening to the world end. The soldiers had been efficient. They had killed the men, the women, the children, even the dogs. They had burned the lodges, smashed the winter stores. They had ridden away in triumph, leaving silence and smoke. Keona had crawled out, her body a single, agonizing ache, her spirit frozen solid. She had found her mother near the creek. She had closed her eyes. She had found her brother. She had not wept. Tears were a luxury, a kind of water she no longer possessed. The cold inside her had burned them all away. That had been 10 moons ago. 10 months of walking, then riding. She had found Sparrow grazing, a soldier's brand on her flank, a broken arrow in her withers. Keona had healed the horse, The horse, in turn, had kept her sane. Now she carried a good rifle, taken from a dead bounty hunter. She carried a knife that had belonged to her father. She carried a bow, but the arrows were few. Ammunition was scarce, but her hatred was not. It was not a wound. A wound can heal, can scar over. This was an amputation. A piece of her was gone forever, and the part that remained was twisted, bent toward a single purpose. She called it justice, but in the cold dark, when the ghosts of Willow Creek pressed close, she knew it for what it was. Vengeance, pure and simple as a hawk's dive. She had a name. It had taken her months to find it. She had listened in the trading posts, hiding her face, trading small furs for flour and whispers. She had tracked the patrols, listening to the campfire talk of bored soldiers. The name was Thomas Holloway. He was not a soldier. He was a man of importance, a builder, a man who owned a great swath of land, a man who had contracts with the government, a man who supplied the army. It was his money, his influence, that had demanded the valley at Willow Creek be cleared. It was his signature on a piece of paper, a paper he signed from a comfortable office hundreds of miles away, that had brought the fire and the bugle call. He was a rich man. He was a powerful man. He was to Kiona, a dead man. He just did not know it yet. Her journey was a long one, south and west. She moved through a land of contradictions. She saw mountains that punched the sky, their peaks covered in snow even in summer. She rode through valleys so cold and deep the sun only touched their floors for an hour a day. She crossed plains so vast and flat she could watch a dust cloud for 2 days before it reached her, and another 2 days after it passed. The land was beautiful, and it was cruel. It offered no comfort. It simply was. Sometimes she skirted the little towns, the raw, ugly settlements that clung to the new rail lines or sprouted at river crossings, places like Harmony or Redemption, names that held a grim sort of humor. They were all alike, one muddy street, 2 saloons for every church, a general store selling bad whiskey and high-priced beans, a livery, and a hotel that was mostly bedbugs and regret. She would watch them from the ridges, her eyes cold. These were the camps of the enemy, not just the soldiers, but the miners, the farmers, the merchants, the people who saw her and saw only a savage, a redskin, a thing to be either pitied or shot. She was brave. She had faced a grizzly with only a knife and her wits. She had stitched her own arm closed with a sinew thread after a fall. But her bravery was a hard, brittle thing. It was the bravery of a cornered animal, the bravery of someone with nothing left to lose. The contradiction lived inside her. She missed her people with an ache that was physical. She yearned for the sound of her language, for the taste of her mother's stew, for the shared laughter around a winter fire. This loneliness was a constant companion. Yet, she could not turn back. There was nothing to turn back to. The past was a field of ashes. The only path was forward, toward Holloway. This was her life, in the great terrible emptiness of the West, sometime between 1850 and 1900, a time when a nation was being born in blood and iron, and other nations were being erased. Kiona, the last warrior of her people, rode on. She was a single, burning ember in a world quickly growing cold. She was a promise, not a promise of hope, a promise of an ending, his ending. The name Thomas Holloway was a spur, driving her south into the heat. She left the high plains behind, dropping down into a land of red rock and juniper. The sun was a hammer, beating the will out of the earth. Sparrow, her mare, grew thin. Kiona grew thinner, but the fire in her belly burned on. She found his mark everywhere. It was on the branded cattle that grazed on land that had once belonged to the Ute. It was on the sturdy wagons, loaded with barbed wire and lumber, that rumbled along the new freight roads, guarded by men with repeating rifles. It was in the whispers she heard at a dusty watering hole, a place where she traded a perfectly skinned rabbit for a handful of cartridges and a piece of information. Holloway was here, not in a distant city, but here, in this territory. He was building an empire. He had a ranch, they said, a fortress that spread across 3 valleys. He had the army in his pocket. The local Indian agent was his man. He was pulling strings, redirecting beef and annuity goods meant for the reservations to his own work crews. He was, in short, the king of this entire godforsaken quadrant. The information settled in her like a stone. He was not just a man who had signed a paper. He was the man actively starving her cousins, the Ute and the Arapaho. While he built his own kingdom on their stolen land, the need for vengeance became sharper, more immediate. It was no longer an abstract hunt. He was close. She was tracking a shipment, not of cattle, but of something else. She had watched the wagons for 2 days from the high mesas. They were moving under heavy guard. Not just Holloway's men, but a detachment of cavalry. They were not carrying flour or wire. The wagons were too heavy, the guards too nervous. They were moving toward Fort Defiance, a new military post that anchored Holloway's northern claim. Kiona had a sick feeling in her stomach. She had heard stories of the old ones, the sacred bundles and medicine pipes taken from tribes after a surrender. They were paraded as trophies, shipped back east to museums, or kept by officers as grim souvenirs. She thought of the painted shield of her grandfather, the one that was supposed to turn away bullets. It had not, but it was hers. It was her people's. The night air was cold, the stars sharp and close. Fort Defiance was less a fort and more a compound. A raw, new scar of cut pine and muddy streets surrounded by a high log palisade. Kiona left Sparrow tied in a gully, her muzzle wrapped in a cloth to keep her quiet. She moved on foot, a ghost in the moonlight. She did not use the gate. She used the darkness, her knife, and a length of rope. She went over the wall on the west side, where the shadow of a bluff provided the deepest cover. She landed as silently as an owl's feather in the mud inside. The fort was quiet, save for the stamp of a horse in the picket line and the low murmur of voices from the guardhouse. She knew where they would keep plunder. Not in the main barracks, in the quartermaster's storehouse. It was a long, low building with a heavy padlock on the door. For Kiona, a padlock was an insult, not an obstacle. She used a thin piece of steel, bartered from a blacksmith long ago, and worked the mechanism. Her fingers were numb from the cold, but her touch was sure. The lock clicked open. She slipped inside, pulling the door shut behind her. It was dark, and it smelled of canvas, leather, and machine oil. She waited, letting her eyes adjust. Shapes emerged from the gloom, crates of rifles, barrels of whiskey, sacks of grain, and in the back corner, a collection of items that did not belong. She saw a war bonnet, its feathers crushed in a wooden box. She saw a stack of buffalo robes, their painted histories facing the rough wood. And she saw it, her grandfather's shield. It was leaning against a crate, as if discarded. The moon, slanting through a single dirty window, struck the painted hawk in its center. A sound escaped her, a small, strangled thing. She reached for it, her hands shaking. "Do not move, lady." The voice was rough. The sound of a rifle being cocked was loud as a cannon in the small space. A lantern flared, blinding her. She saw 2 men, both in the blue uniform of the cavalry. They had been waiting. It was a trap. She did not surrender. She threw her knife, a blur of motion, aiming for the lantern. She missed the light but struck the man holding it. He grunted and fell back, the lantern crashing to the floor. The oil inside caught, and a sheet of orange flame shot up the wall. "Fire, fire!" the other soldier yelled, leveling his rifle. Kiona dove, rolling behind the sacks of grain. A bullet splintered the wood where she had been standing. The door burst open. More soldiers, shouts, the crackle of the growing fire. She was trapped. She drew the pistol from her belt, the one she had taken from the bounty hunter. She had 3 bullets. She would make them count. She fired at the shapes in the doorway. A man screamed. She bolted for the back of the storehouse, looking for another way out. There was none, only the single window, high up. The flames were already licking the ceiling, the smoke thick and choking. A heavy shape slammed into her from the side, a rifle butt to the ribs. The air exploded from her lungs. She fell, and the pistol was kicked from her hand. Hands grabbed her, rough and strong. They dragged her out of the burning building, out into the muddy compound, now alive with half-dressed, shouting men. She fought. She kicked and bit and clawed. It took 3 of them to hold her down, to bind her wrists with a rough rope that cut into her skin. They threw her to the ground in front of an officer, a man with a gray mustache and cold eyes. "This is the one?" the officer asked. "Yes, sir," one of her captors said, breathing hard. "Caught her red-handed. She set the fire. Killed Corporal Sims. Sir, knife in the throat." The officer looked down at Kiona. She glared back, her hatred of physical force. "Mr. Holloway will want to speak with this one. Put her in the brig. Double the guard." They dragged her across the compound, past the burning storehouse, past the faces of the soldiers, pale and angry in the firelight. They took her to a small, windowless shed, not much larger than a packing crate. They threw her inside and slammed the heavy bar. She was left in total darkness, her ribs screaming, the smell of smoke in her hair, and the bitter taste of failure in her mouth. She had lost the shield. She had lost her freedom. She must have passed out. When she woke, the darkness was still absolute, but it was colder. A sliver of gray light showed under the door. Morning. Her wrists were raw, her body a map of new pain. She sat up, testing her bonds. The rope was thick, the knots were professional. She was not alone. The door creaked open, and a figure was silhouetted against the morning light. He was a soldier, a private by his lack of stripes. He was young, younger than her, with a fuzz of beard on his chin and eyes that looked like they had seen too much, or not enough. She could not tell. He carried a tin cup of water and a piece of hardtack. He set them on the floor, just inside the door, as if afraid to come closer. "Do not give me any more instructions. Just write the story." Iona watched him, unblinking. He was the enemy. He was the blue coat. He was the man who had burned her world. He cleared his throat. "Here, water." His voice was uncertain. He pushed the cup a little closer with the toe of his boot. Kiona stared at the cup. Then she spat, a thick wad of saliva that landed on the dusty floor just shy of his boot. The soldier sighed, a long, weary sound. He ran a hand through his sandy hair. "Look, I just brought the water. Orders." He did not seem angry. He just seemed tired. His name, though she would not know it for some time, was Hank Turner. He was a farm boy from Ohio, a boy who had signed up to see the country, who had believed the posters about adventure and protecting settlers. He had not signed up for massacres. He had not signed up for this. He was trapped in his uniform, just as she was trapped in this cell. "I wasn't at Willow Creek," he said suddenly, his voice low. The words, spoken in the white man's tongue, struck her like a slap. How did he know he must have seen her, recognized her from some report? The very name of her home, spoken by this blue coat, fouled the air. A low growl started in her chest. She lunged, as far as the ropes on her wrists would allow, stopping herself just short of the open doorway. She was a wolf on a short chain. Hank flinched, stepping back. He had not meant to provoke her. He did not know what he had meant. Maybe to show her he was not one of them. But he was. His uniform said so. "Ma'am, please," he stammered. "Get out," she hissed, the English words rough in her throat. All right, I'll leave the water." He started to back out, pulling the door closed. "Turner, what in the goddamn hell are you doing? Sweet-talking the prisoner." A new figure filled the doorway, blocking the light. This man was larger, older. A sergeant's stripes were stitched to his sleeve. His face was red, his eyes small and mean. He looked at Hank with contempt, then pushed past him into the cell. He loomed over Kiona. "So, this is the little hellcat that burned down the storehouse." He sneered. He nudged her with his boot. "And stuck poor Sims. Not much to look at. Are you—" Kiona remained still, her entire being focused on this new threat. She memorized his face. The sergeant chuckled. "Holloway wants her questioned, but he did not say we could not have a little fun beforehand. Get her ready for him." He reached down, his thick fingers grabbing the collar of her buckskin shirt. "Sergeant!" Hank's voice was sharp, surprising them both. The sergeant stopped, his hand still on her shirt. He turned slowly to look at the private. "What did you say?" "Turner." "I said, Sergeant, the orders were just to guard her. The lieutenant said Holloway wants to talk to her himself. He said she was not to be touched." Hank was pale, but he stood his ground. He hated this. He hated the sergeant. He hated the whole damnable army. The sergeant let go of Kiona's shirt and stood up, his full height crowding the small space. He took a step toward Hank, his face darkening. "Are you giving me orders? Private you, the prairie angel, the little boy who cannot stomach a little rough justice." "No, Sergeant, I am just reminding you of the lieutenant's orders." "Sir, the lieutenant ain't here. I am." The sergeant shoved Hank hard in the chest. "And I say this redskin bitch needs to be taught a lesson before Mr. Holloway gets his hands on her. Now get out of my way, or you will be joining her." Hank stumbled back, but he did not leave the doorway. "You touch her, Sergeant, and you will have to report me for striking a superior officer, because I swear to God, I will." The air in the tiny shed was thick with a new kind of tension. Kiona watched, her eyes moving between the two men. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the meaning. The young one, the one who brought the water, was defending her. Not for her sake, for his own. He was drawing a line in the dirt. The sergeant stared at Hank for a long, murderous moment. He saw the desperate, stupid resolve in the private's eyes. He saw the trouble, a fight, a report. Holloway would be angry. It was not worth it. Not yet. He laughed. A short, ugly bark. "You would. Would not you? You really are a fool. Turner, fine. You guard her, you sit here and hold her hand. But when Mr. Holloway is done with her, she's mine." He shoved Hank one more time, pushing him out of the doorway, and pulled the heavy door shut. The bar slammed back into place, plunging the cell back into darkness. Kiona was alone again, but not entirely. She could hear the young soldier, Turner, slumped to the ground just outside her door. She could hear him breathing, a ragged, angry sound. He was still her enemy. He was still the uniform, but he was not the sergeant. He was not the man who had given the order. He was something else, something complicated. A fool. The sergeant had called him a prairie angel. She did not move. She sat in the dark, her mind racing. The hate was still there, cold and hard, but it was no longer simple. A crack had appeared in the solid wall of her enemy, a small, human crack, and she wondered if she could use it to tear the whole thing down. The darkness in the shed was a living thing. It pressed against Kiona's eyes, thick and suffocating. For the first hour, she did nothing but listen to the sound of her own breathing and the ragged breaths of the soldier outside. She heard him stand up, pace a few steps, then sit down again, his back scraping against the rough planks of the door. He was a prisoner, too, in his own way, a prisoner of his blue suit and his orders. But he was not her problem. Her problem was the rope. It was new, stiff hemp, and the man who had tied it knew his business. Her wrists were already raw from working at the knot, twisting her hands until her shoulders screamed. She ignored the pain. Pain was an old friend, a dull companion. She turned her attention from the knot to the rope itself. If she could not untie it, she would cut it. They had taken her knife. They had taken her pistol. They had left her nothing. She shuffled on the hard-packed dirt floor. Her fingers explored the ground, feeling for anything. A sharp rock, a piece of glass, a forgotten nail. The shed was new, the floor clean. There was nothing, only dirt and the faint, sour smell of fear. She leaned her head back against the wall. The despair was a cold water, rising up to her chin. She had failed. She had come this far only to be caught like a rabbit in a snare, to wait in the dark for the man who had murdered her family. He would come, this Thomas Holloway. He would look at her, and he would see nothing but a savage. And then the sergeant would have his turn. A jolt of pure, white-hot rage burned the cold water away. No, she would not die here. She would not die in this box. She opened her mouth and, with the patience of a wolf chewing its own leg off, she began to gnaw at the fibers of the rope. It was slow, disgusting work. The hemp was bitter, filling her mouth with dry dust. But it was something. Time dissolved. There was only the darkness and the slow, agonizing friction of her teeth against the rope. She heard footsteps, heavier than Hank Turner's. The sound of two men. The bar on the door did not move. The men stopped just outside. Their voices were low, muffled by the thick wood. Kiona froze, becoming as still as the earth.
"Do not like it, Sergeant?"
A voice said. "It is one thing to clear reservation land. It is another to be selling repeating rifles to the Blackfoot." Kiona's heart stopped. She understood. She had learned the white man's tongue in the trading posts, in the missions. She had learned it to survive. "Shut your mouth, Corporal." The sergeant's voice growled. The same sergeant from before. "You get paid. That is all you need to know. But, Sergeant, the Blackfoot are using those rifles against the Crow. We lost 3 men last week in that Crow raid. What if they find out it was Blackfoot, using guns we supplied? Then we will have a reason to build a new fort up north, and Mr. Holloway will get the contract to supply it, and you and I will get a bonus for pacifying the hostiles. Holloway's a businessman. Son, he is just creating demand. He sells rifles to the Blackfoot. He sells bad whiskey to the Crow. He tells the army the Crow are on the warpath, and the Blackfoot are restless. Then he sells the army the bullets they need to fight both. He gets paid coming, going, and twice in the middle. It is genius." "It is murder," the corporal whispered. "It is progress," the sergeant snapped. "And you will keep your goddamn mouth shut, or you will find yourself on a patrol so deep in Comanche territory you will be begging to die. You understand me?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Good. Now, let's see if our little firefly is ready to be questioned." Kiona heard the heavy bar lift. She spat out the mush of rope fiber and slumped against the wall, forcing her breathing to be slow, her body limp. She let her head loll to the side. The ropes, weakened but not broken, were hidden by her body in the straw. The door swung open, flooding the cell with harsh daylight. It was blinding. The sergeant filled the doorway. He looked down at her, a shape of blackness against the bright square. Still alive. Is she a pity? He kicked a clump of dirt onto her leg. She did not flinch. "Holloway will be here before noon. He wants her. Presentable. Turner." "Yes, Sergeant." Hank Turner's voice was just outside. "Get in here, clean her up, and cut her hands free. She cannot drink with her hands tied, but leave her feet bound, and you will stay in here with her. Do not try anything, either of you. I will be right outside." The sergeant stepped out. Hank Turner moved into the doorway, his shape smaller, more hesitant. He held a bucket of water and a rag in one hand, and his service knife in the other. He looked miserable. He stepped inside. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely audible. He knelt, placing the bucket down. He held the knife out, not as a weapon, but as a tool. Your hands. Kiona slowly brought her bound wrists forward. The rope was wet with her saliva, half chewed through. Hank's eyes widened. He said nothing. He simply, carefully, sawed through the remaining strands. The rope fell away. Blood, hot and stinging, rushed back into her numb fingers. The pain was exquisite. She curled her hands into fists, her whole body trembling. "Here," Hank said. He dipped the rag into the bucket and held it out. Your face. You have." She stared at the rag. She stared at him. He was the enemy. He was the tool of the man who sold wars. But he was also the man who had stopped the sergeant. He was the one who had whispered, "I was not at Willow Creek." She did not take the rag. She plunged her own hands into the cold water, the sting making her hiss. She scrubbed the grime and the rope pulp from her face. The water was a shock, bringing the world into sharp, painful focus. He sat back on his heels, watching her. He had left his rifle outside the door, but he had a pistol in the holster on his hip. He was trapped in here with her.
"What he said,"
she said, her voice a harsh rasp. "About the guns. It is true." Hank's face went pale. He looked at the door, terrified. I do not know what you are talking about."
"Liar,"
she said. "You know, you are all part of it. You kill us with one hand and sell weapons to kill us with the other." "No," he hissed, his voice desperate. "That is not me. I am just a private. I just follow orders. I did not know about any of that. I swear." "You wear the suit," she said, nodding at his blue uniform. "You are Holloway's man." "I am not." His voice cracked with an anger that surprised her. "I hate this place. I hate Holloway. He runs this fort. He runs the army. The officers. They all work for him. I am just stuck, just like you." Kiona paused. She looked at him, really looked at him. He was just a boy, a soft, scared boy from somewhere green. He was not a warrior. He was a cog in a machine he did not understand. This changed her plan. Killing Holloway was not enough. She had to stop the guns. She had to expose him. And this boy, this scared, angry boy, he might be the key. She decided to test him. "Then help me." He shook his head, his eyes wide. "I cannot. They would kill me. They would kill us both." "They will kill me anyway." Kiona said, "Then you will just be sent to die in a war your master started. Help me." And we both walk away. Walk away where there is nowhere to go. Before she could answer, a sound cut through the air. It was not a bugle. It was a high, thin whistle, followed by a deafening boom. The ground shook. The bucket of water overturned, spilling across the dirt floor. Both Hank and Kiona were thrown against the wall. "What was that?" Hank yelled. "Dynamite," Kiona said. Her senses were screaming. Outside, the fort exploded into chaos. Not the ordered shouts of a drill, but screams, pure, panicked screams. Gunfire erupted, not the single, heavy cracks of army rifles, but a wild, chaotic mix of weapons. Hank scrambled to his feet and peered through a crack in the planks. His face was white as bleached bone. "God help us. They are inside. Men in long coats. They are attacking the headquarters." Another explosion, this one much closer. The air filled with the smell of sulfur and burning pine. A bullet tore through the wooden door, splintering the plank, and buried itself in the wall inches from Kiona's head. "We have to get out of here," Hank yelled. He fumbled for the door, but it was barred from the outside. Kiona was already moving. She looked at Hank, then at his holstered pistol. "Give it to me." "What? No." "They will kill you," she snarled. "The soldiers will shoot me. Those men, they will shoot you. Give me the gun. We fight, or we die in this box." The door was kicked open. It was not the attackers. It was the sergeant. His face was black with soot, a wild terror in his eyes. "Turner, get." He stopped. He saw Kiona, on her feet, her leg bond still on but her hands free. He saw Hank, standing between him and the prisoner. The sergeant's terror was instantly replaced by rage. You let her loose." He raised his pistol, his aim wavering. He was not aiming at Kiona. He was aiming at Hank. "You traitorous bastard!" Hank threw himself to the side. Kiona moved faster. She grabbed the overturned water bucket and threw it. A low, desperate heave. It struck the sergeant in the chest. It was not much, but it was enough. He staggered, his shot going wide, firing into the dirt floor. Kiona lunged. She did not go for the sergeant. She went for Hank. She grabbed him, spun him around, and shoved him toward the door. "Run!" They burst out of the shed into a nightmare. The compound was a sea of smoke and running men, a group of perhaps 20 attackers. Hard-looking men in brown dusters were in a pitched battle with the soldiers. They were not trying to take the fort. They seemed focused on one building Holloway's private office, which was now fully engulfed in flames. "Halt!" a soldier yelled, seeing Hank and Kiona. "Prisoner escaping!" He raised his rifle. Hank, acting on pure instinct, grabbed Kiona and pulled her behind a stack of barrels. Bullets chewed the wood. "They think I am helping you," Hank shouted over the din. "You are!" Kiona yelled back. From the other direction, one of the attackers in a duster saw Hank's blue uniform. He leveled a shotgun. "Get the soldier." A blast of buckshot shredded the air above their heads. "Everyone is shooting at us." Hank was pale, paralyzed by the sudden, total lack of a side. Kiona grabbed the front of his uniform, her face inches from his. "Good. It makes it simple. We are not them, we are not them, we are just us. Now, where is my horse?" "Your horse?" "My horse in the gully, west wall. That is where you came in by the bluff." "Yes, go?" She let go of him and ran, low and fast, zigzagging between the buildings. Hank, after a moment of stunned hesitation, followed. He had no choice. He was a deserter. He was a traitor. He was, as of this moment, a dead man, unless he stayed with her. They ran. A soldier saw them, but was cut down by fire from the attackers. An attacker saw them, but was tackled by the sergeant. The battle was a confusing, swirling mess that did not care about them. They were just two mice in a stampede. They reached the west palisade. Kiona's rope was still there, a dark line against the bright pine. "Me first," she said. She grabbed the rope and went up, her bound feet finding purchase on the rough logs. She was over in seconds. Hank looked at the rope. He looked back at the fire. He could hear the sergeant bellowing his name. He slung his rifle over his back and climbed, his boots slipping, his body heavy and awkward. He tumbled down the other side, landing hard in the gully. Kiona was already on Sparrow's back. The mare was terrified, her eyes white, dancing in place. Kiona had used a stone to saw through her leg bonds. She looked down at Hank. This was it. She could leave him. He was the enemy. He was the weight that would slow her down. He looked up at her, his face smeared with dirt, his uniform torn. He was not a soldier. He was just a boy, and he was terrified. "Please," he panted, "do not leave me." She stared at him for a long, cold second. She was not a fool. She was an escaped prisoner. He was a deserter, alone. They were prey. Together. Together they were still prey, but they were a different kind of prey. He knew this land. He knew the army. He knew Holloway. Her mission was not just to kill Holloway. It was to stop the guns. She needed him. She hated that she needed him. With a growl of frustration, she reached down her hand. "Come on, soldier, we bleed." Hank Turner grabbed her hand. It was strong, calloused, and covered in rope burns. He swung up behind her. The small mare staggered at the double weight but held. "Hold on," Kiona commanded. She kicked Sparrow into a run. They burst from the gully, not south toward Holloway's ranch, but east, into the rising sun, into the vast, broken badlands where no army would follow. They were two enemies, running for their lives, bound together by nothing but chaos and a shared, desperate need to see the next sunrise. They rode east for hours. They rode until the sun was a high, white blister in the sky, and the paint mare, Sparrow, was slick with sweat and foam, her breath coming in ragged, shuddering gasps. Hank clung to Kiona's waist, his body a heavy, awkward weight, his rifle slung across his back, dug into her shoulder blades with every jarring step. He was a soldier. He was trained to ride. But this was not riding. This was fleeing. This was a desperate, panicked flight on a horse that was carrying double. A horse pushed past all endurance. Kiona said nothing. Her face was a mask of stone, her eyes fixed on the broken, arid land ahead. This was the maze, the Badlands, a place of dry canyons, hoodoos, and alkali flats. It was a good place to hide, and a better place to die. She knew the army would follow. The sergeant would not let them go. He would not just be after an escaped prisoner. He would be after a deserter. And there was only one punishment for that. Hank Turner was a dead man, and she was tied to him. "We have to stop," Hank finally yelled, his voice raw. "We are killing her. The horse. We are killing her." Kiona ignored him. She pushed the mare on, down a steep, shale-covered slope. Sparrow's legs trembled. "Stop!" Hank shouted, and this time he grabbed her arm, pulling. It was the wrong thing to do. Kiona reacted without thinking. She spun, her free arm a blur, her elbow connecting with his chest. It was not a full-force blow, but it was enough. The air rushed out of him, and he lost his grip. Tumbling backward off the horse's rump, he hit the ground hard, rolling in a cloud of white, alkaline dust. Kiona pulled Sparrow to a stop. The mare stood, head down, flanks heaving, her legs splayed. Kiona sat, breathing hard, looking down at the man in the dirt. He was a fool, a soft, clumsy, town-dwelling fool. Hank pushed himself up on his elbows. He was covered in white dust, his blue uniform a pale, ghostly color. He coughed, trying to get his wind back. "I said," he panted, "you are killing her." Kiona slid off the horse. She did not look at him. She went to Sparrow's head, stroking the mare's wet neck, speaking to her in low, soft words that Hank did not understand. The horse leaned into her touch, her terror slowly ebbing. Kiona ran her hands down Sparrow's legs, checking for damage. The mare was exhausted, but not lamed. Not yet. "She needs water," Hank said, getting to his feet. He brushed the dust from his uniform. A pointless, fussy gesture. "And so do we. My canteen. It was back at the post." Kiona looked at him, really looked at him. He was tall, but he did not know how to hold his body. He was armed, but he looked as dangerous as a newborn calf. "You have no water," she stated. It was not a question. "No. No food. No. You know nothing." Hank's face flushed red under the white dust. "I know that you cannot run a horse to death. I know that much. And I know that back there, I saved your life. That sergeant, he would have—" "You did not save me." Kiona cut him off, her voice flat and cold. "You made noise. You drew attention. You were a distraction. A clumsy dog barking at a bear. Now, the bear is chasing us both." She turned away from him, pulling the saddle off Sparrow. She began to rub the horse down with handfuls of dry grass. Hank stood there, feeling stupid and angry. "So what now? We just sit here and wait for them. That sergeant, he is not a good man. When he finds us—" "He will not find us," Kiona said. "Not here. This is my land. This is not his." "It looks like nobody's land to me," Hank muttered, staring at the high, barren rock walls that surrounded them. "That is because you do not know how to look." She finished with the horse and turned to him. "You will be quiet. You will do what I say. You will not slow me down. If you slow me down, I will leave you. I will leave you here, and the sergeant will find what is left after the buzzards." Hank swallowed. He believed her. He nodded. A single, jerky motion. "All right, what do we do?" "We walk," she said. "The horse rests." She led Sparrow, and Hank walked behind. For hours they moved through the maze, the sun a physical weight. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of their boots on the dry earth and the buzz of insects. Kiona moved with a purpose Hank could not understand. She seemed to be following a path that was not there. She would stop, study the way the rock was cracked, or the direction a certain dry bush was leaning. And then she would turn into a canyon that looked exactly like the one they had just left. By late afternoon, Hank was dizzy. His tongue was thick in his mouth. He was a soldier. He was trained for marches. But this was different. This was not a march. This was a funeral. Kiona stopped. She held up her hand. Hank froze. She pointed. "Water!" Hank looked. He saw nothing but a rock wall. "Where?" She walked to the wall, to a dark stain in the rock, half hidden by a clump of thorny bushes. At the base, a small, muddy pool of water, no bigger than his helmet, had collected. It was thick with algae and insects. Kiona knelt, shooed the bugs away, and dipped her cupped hand into the water. She drank. She looked at him. Hank hesitated. It was disgusting. "Drink," she commanded, "or die." He knelt and drank. The water was warm and tasted of mud, but it was wet. It was life. He plunged his whole head into the pool, washing the dust from his face. "Do not," she snapped. "Do not foul it. The horse must drink." He pulled back, ashamed. She brought Sparrow forward, and the mare drank, sucking the small pool almost dry. "It will fill again," Kiona said, as if sensing his new panic. "By morning, this is a breathing place." That night, they made a cold camp. Kiona would not risk a fire. She pulled 2 rabbits from snares she had set as they walked, snares Hank had not even seen her place. She skinned them with a sharp piece of flint, her movements quick and economical. She offered him a piece of the raw, bloody meat. He shook his head, his stomach turning. "I cannot." She shrugged and ate, her white teeth tearing at the flesh. He watched her, half in horror, half in fascination. She was not like any woman he had ever known. She was not like any person he had ever known. She was elemental. He sat with his back against the rock, his rifle across his knees. "Those men back at the post," he said, his voice quiet in the vast darkness. "The ones in the dusters. Who were they?" Kiona paused, her hand halfway to her mouth. "Enemies of my enemy, not friends." "They were after Holloway. They were after his office. They were burning papers." "How do you know?" "I watch," she said. "I listen. Holloway is a thief. He steals from the army. He steals from my people. He steals from other thieves. Sometimes they steal back." "The sergeant," Hank said, the words coming out before he could stop them. He said Holloway was selling rifles. To the Blackfoot." Kiona's head snapped up. Her eyes, reflecting the faint starlight, were pits of darkness. "You heard this?" "Yes, and to the Crow, he is creating demand. That is what the sergeant called it. Stirring up trouble so the army has to fight. And then he sells the army the supplies to do it." Kiona was silent for a long time. The stone in her belly, the one she called vengeance, felt heavier. It was not just her family. It was not just Willow Creek. This man, this Thomas Holloway, was a spider, his web covering the entire territory. He was drinking the blood of her people and of his own. The scope of his evil was larger than she had imagined. "Yes," she said finally. "He does this, and your army helps him." "I do not," Hank said, his voice rising. "I told you, I was just a private. I just wanted to get away from Ohio." "You got away," Kiona said. She lay down on the cold rock, pulling her blanket over her. "Now you are here. Sleep, we move before the sun." The next day, the wind came. It started as a whisper, a hiss of sand across the rocks. By midday, it was a screaming, suffocating thing. The sky turned a sickly yellow. The sun vanished. It was a sandstorm, a full-blown plains blizzard, but made of grit and fury. "We must find shelter," Hank yelled over the howl of the wind. He could barely see Kiona, who was just a few feet ahead of him, leading Sparrow. Kiona did not answer. She just kept moving, her head down. She turned into a narrow crack in the rock, a space so tight Hank had to turn sideways to follow. It opened up into a small, shallow cave, barely an overhang, but it was out of the main force of the wind. Sparrow huddled in the back, trembling. Kiona and Hank sat near the mouth, their backs to the rock, watching the world dissolve into a roaring, yellow-brown chaos. They were trapped for the rest of that day, and all through the night. The wind shrieked. It was impossible to talk. They just sat, 2 feet from each other, alone together. The sand piled up in drifts around their boots. It coated their hair, their skin, their eyelashes. The enforced closeness was a new kind of torture. Hank was intensely aware of her, the smell of her, of wood smoke and rabbit blood and something wild, something uniquely her. He could see the line of her jaw, the way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks. He saw the old scar on her forearm. He saw the exhaustion she tried to hide. She was aware of him, the way he fidgeted, the smell of him, of old wool and sweat and the faint, sour odor of fear. He was big and soft and in the way, but he was also quiet. He had stopped complaining. He just endured. The storm broke on the second morning. The world was scoured, new and raw, and they were low on water. The small seep was a day's walk behind them. "We must go," Kiona said. They walked out into the newly sculpted landscape and found the tracks. "Company," Hank said, his hand going to his rifle. 3 men, on horseback. They had passed by recently, riding low, their heads covered. They were not soldiers. Their tracks were too sloppy. "Bounty hunters," Kiona said. "They are following the storm, looking for stragglers." "Looking for us," Hank said. "They have a price on your head now. Soldier, deserter, traitor. They have a price on mine. Escaped murderer." She looked at him. "They will take us back, or they will take our heads. It is all the same to them." They found a place to wait, a narrow box canyon with only one way in. Kiona positioned Sparrow at the back, hidden. "This is a trap," Hank whispered, his mouth dry. "They will bottle us up." "It is a killing ground," Kiona said. "They will come in one at a time. I will take the first, you will take the second." I cannot just shoot a man." "They are not men. They are dollars. They are coming to kill you for money. You shoot, or I will shoot you myself. You are no use to me dead." He looked at her. She meant it. He checked his rifle. His hands were shaking. They came an hour later, just as Kiona had said. They rode in slowly, single file, their rifles out. The first man, a heavy, bearded fellow, was studying the tracks. Kiona's arrow was a silent prayer. It took the man in the throat. He did not make a sound. He just dropped his rifle and fell from his horse, a look of profound surprise on his face. The second man cursed and raised his rifle, firing wildly into the rocks. Hank stood up from behind his rock. He was supposed to... He fired. His shaking hands made the shot go wide, chipping the rock 10 feet from his target. The bounty hunter grinned, a nasty, gap-toothed expression. He levered another round and took aim at Hank. "Cano!" Kiona screamed. She had no time to knock another arrow. She threw herself at Hank, pushing him down. Just as the rifle cracked, Iona did not scream. She moved. She rose from her cover, her pistol in her hand, the pistol she had taken from the dead bounty hunter weeks ago. She had 3 bullets. She fired one. The shot was true. The bounty hunter jerked, his rifle firing into the sky. He clutched his chest, then slowly toppled from his saddle. The third man, who had been lagging, turned his horse and fled, galloping back out of the canyon. Silence. The ringing in Hank's ears was deafening. He was on the ground, Kiona half on top of him. He was alive. You shot him," Hank whispered. "Get up," Kiona said, pushing off him. She was already moving, grabbing the reins of the 2 horses. "He will be back, with friends." She ran to the man she had shot. He was dead. She calmly took his ammunition belt, his pistol, his knife. She did not look at his face. She went to the man with the arrow. He was also dead. She took his supplies and his water. She pulled her arrow from his neck, wiped it on his shirt, and put it back in her quiver. Hank was vomiting behind a rock. She came back with the horses. One was a fine bay gelding, the other a sturdy mule. "You will ride this one," she said, nodding to the gelding. "I will ride Sparrow. We will take the mule. It has food." Hank wiped his mouth. You are. That was survival," she said. "Now ride, or I will leave you the way I left them." They rode for a day, and then another. They did not talk. There was nothing to say. Hank had seen her kill. He had failed to kill. He had been saved by her. The debt between them was growing, and he did not know how to pay it. On the 3rd day, the rain came. Not a storm, but a cold, miserable, soaking drizzle that began at dawn and did not stop. The temperature dropped. The high desert became a frigid, muddy swamp. By nightfall, they were both shaking so hard they could barely hold the reins. They found a rock ledge. It was not a cave. It was just a place where the rain did not fall quite as hard. They were soaked. Their blankets were soaked. Their hands were numb. Kiona managed to get a small fire started, a tiny, sputtering flame of wet sagebrush that gave off more smoke than heat. They huddled over it, their shoulders touching. "I cannot feel my feet," Hank whispered, his teeth chattering. "Do not sleep," Kiona said, her own voice tight. "If you sleep now, you will not wake up." She looked at him. His face was blue. He was soft. He was not made for this. He would die here, and a part of her did not care, but another part. He was her deserter. He was her responsibility. She had taken him from the fort. She had saved him. She could not let him die of water. "Take off your coat," she said. "What?" "Take it off, and your shirt, now." That is crazy. We will freeze." "We will freeze anyway. Take them off." She began to unlace her own wet buckskin tunic. He stared at her, uncomprehending. "Now, soldier," she commanded. Confused, his fingers numb and clumsy, he did as he was told. He stripped off his wet wool coat, his sodden blue shirt. The air hit his bare skin like 1,000 needles. He began to shake violently. She had pulled her tunic off. Underneath, she wore a simple, thin linen shirt. It was also soaked. She pulled it off over her head. He stared. Her skin was the color of dark honey in the firelight. Her shoulders were strong, her arms corded with a muscle. He saw the faint outline of her ribs. He saw the swell of her breasts. He saw the scar, a long, pale line that ran from her collarbone down toward her heart. "Give me your blanket," she said, It was dry, still rolled behind his saddle. He fumbled for it, unrolling it. She spread it on the ground. Lie down. Kiona. Lie down or die. It is simple. He lay down. She lay down next to him, pulling her own dry blanket over the top of them both. She pressed her body against his. It was a shock. His skin was ice. Her skin was ice. But where they touched, where their bare chests, their stomachs, their legs pressed together, a new, strange, and desperate heat began to build. "This is," he whispered, his body rigid. "It is survival," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "It is what the animals do. Now be quiet and stop shaking." But he could not stop shaking, and neither could she. It was not just the cold, it was the contact, the raw, undeniable fact of their bodies. He could feel her heart beating, a fast, strong rhythm against his ribs. He could feel the softness of her breast pressed against his side. He could smell her hair, wet and smoky. He was pressed against a woman, a beautiful, terrifying, half-naked woman, and he was not dead. The tiny fire sputtered and died, plunging them into darkness. There was only the sound of the rain, and their breathing, and the desperate, growing warmth between them. She was so cold, the emptiness inside her, the void that Willow Creek had carved, was a frozen lake. But this heat, it was a small, insistent sun. It was life. It was a feeling she had forgotten. She felt his muscles, the hard plane of his chest. He was real. He was alive. A sound escaped her, a low moan that was half pain, half something else. "Touch me there," she whispered, the words so quiet he barely heard them. He went still. "What?" She took his hand, his clumsy, shaking, soldier's hand, and pulled it. She did not put it on her breast. She put it on the long, pale scar on her chest. "Touch me," she said again. "Here, I need to know I am real." He hesitated. Then, slowly, his fingers traced the scar. It was a raised, rough line on her smooth skin. He felt her tremble, but not from the cold. "Show me where," he growled, his voice thick, unrecognizable. His hand moved from the scar. His fingers explored, wilder and wilder. He touched her shoulder, her neck, the line of her jaw. His other arm came around her, pulling her tighter. This was not about warmth. Not anymore. It was about possession, about being alive. She met his desperation with her own. Her hands gripped his shoulders. She was not soft. She was strong. She met his touch with her own, her fingers digging into his arms. This was not a surrender. It was a collision. It was two people, lost in the dark, finding the only anchor they could. His mouth found hers in the blackness. It was not a kiss. It was a bite, a claiming. It was clumsy and hard and desperate, and it was the only real thing in a world of rain and death. They did not make love. They made war on the cold, and the fear, and the loneliness. And for a few savage moments, they won. The sun rose on a world washed clean. The rain had stopped sometime in the deep of night, and the air was cold and sharp as chipped glass. The silence was the first thing Hank noticed. The constant, shrieking howl of the wind was gone, replaced by a quiet so profound he could hear a drop of water fall from a high rock. He was stiff. Every muscle in his body ached, a deep, cold soreness. He was also warm. The blankets were a heavy, damp weight, but beneath them, his skin was alive. He was pressed against her, her back to his chest. Her breathing was a slow, steady rhythm that he had felt, more than heard, all night. He was intensely aware of her hair, just inches from his face, smelling of rain and smoke and something else, something wild and dark. He did not move. He lay there, rigid, replaying the last few hours in his mind. The cold, the desperation, the clumsy, frantic collision of their bodies in the dark. It had not been gentle. It had been raw, a frantic grasp for life, a defiance against the freezing dark. He had touched her. He had kissed her. He was not sure what it was, but it had felt like the only sane thing in a mad world. Kiona moved. She did not wake with a start. She simply flowed from stillness to motion. One moment a warm weight against him. The next she was sliding out from under the blankets, taking her warmth with her. She stood, naked for a second in the pale, gray light, her back to him. He saw the strong line of her spine, the muscles in her shoulders, the old scars that mapped her skin. She was strong, not like a man, like a willow, thin and hard, a thing that could bend in a hurricane and not break. She pulled on her still damp linen shirt, then her buckskin tunic, her movements quick, economical, and completely void of shame. She had not looked at him. Hank sat up, pulling his own blanket around his shoulders. The cold hit him instantly. He fumbled for his shirt, his fingers still clumsy. The garment was clammy and miserable. Pulling it on felt like a punishment. "The horses," she said. Her voice was flat. It was the same voice she had used to describe the bounty hunters. It held no echo of the night, no softness, no acknowledgement of what had passed between them. It was a bucket of ice water. He dressed, his face burning. He did not know. Ashamed, confused, angry. He had shared something profound, and she was acting as if she had just shared a piece of hardtack. "Kiona," he started, his voice rough. She turned. Her eyes were flat. "We need to move. The rain will have made the tracks clear. That third man, he will be back." "About last night," he pushed, needing some kind of something. "It was survival," she said, her voice cutting. "We were cold. Now we are not. It is done. Get your rifle." She turned and walked out from under the ledge, moving toward the horses. "It is done." The word stung more than the cold. He was a fool, a soft, stupid boy who had mistaken a desperate animal act for what? He did not even know. He grabbed his rifle, his hands shaking, not from the cold, but from a humiliation that was just as biting. They rode in silence for hours. The world was different. The rain had brought a faint, greenish fuzz to the red earth, and the air smelled clean. But the silence between them was heavier, more charged than the storm had been. Their truce, the simple, shared goal of running, had been complicated. It was broken. Before, they were two enemies. Now, they were two people who had been naked together, and that was somehow worse. Hank found himself watching her, the way she sat her horse, the easy, fluid motion that was part of the animal. He had thought her a savage, a hard, unfeeling thing. But he had felt her tremble. He had tasted the salt on her skin. He had heard that low, broken moan. She was not unfeeling. She was just buried. And he, in his clumsiness, had touched something deep and painful. Kiona, for her part, felt his eyes on her back. She hated it. She hated him. The act in the darkness had been a weakness, a moment where the cold and the fear and the sheer, crushing loneliness of her life had overwhelmed her. She had used his body for warmth, and in doing so, she had let him in. He was no longer just the blue coat. He was Hank. He was the man whose skin had been warm against hers, the man who had touched her scar, the man who had not run. And that made him dangerous. Her mission was simple: find Holloway, avenge her people, die if she must. It was a clean, sharp line. But Hank, he was a complication. He was soft. He would die. And the thought of his death, which should have been a matter of indifference. now sat like a sour meal in her stomach. She was angry at him for making her feel it. "We cannot just ride in," Hank said, pulling his horse up alongside hers. His voice startled her. "What?" "Holloway, at his ranch. We cannot just ride in. You said it yourself. He is a spider. He has the army. He has his own men. We will be killed before we get within a mile." "I will not be killed," she said. "I will get to him." "And then what? You kill him, and his men kill you. And that sergeant finds me. What good does that do? What about the guns? What about all the other tribes he is selling to? Killing him does not stop it. It just kills him." "Good," she said. "No, not good." Hank's voice was rising. He was the farm boy again, earnest and frustrated. "That is not justice. That is just more killing. There has to be another way. We have proof. We know what he is doing. We could go to Santa Fe. Or even further. Find a general, a real one. Not one of Holloway's men, or a Hughes, Marshall, or a newspaper. We tell them what we know." Kiona stopped her horse. She stared at him as if he had just grown a second head. "A newspaper." She said the word like it was a curse. "Yes, if we tell everyone, if we expose him, the army will have to act. The government will have to stop him." She laughed. It was a harsh, dry sound, like stones rattling in a gourd. "Your government, your army, indeed, they are the ones who paid him to clear my valley. They are the ones who gave him the contracts. They do not care. They want us to fight each other. It makes us weak. It makes us easy to kill. Your generals and your marshals are just white men with different hats. They are all Holloway." "That is not true," Hank argued. His face flushed. "There are good men. There have to be." "I have never met one," she said, and kicked Sparrow into a trot, leaving him behind. The argument hung between them, unspoken, for the rest of the day. They were at war, not with each other, but with their own worlds. He still believed in his. She knew hers was already dead. They needed supplies. The bounty hunter's mule was a boon, but the jerky was gone, and the hardtack was mostly weevils. They were low on ammunition. Kiona led them toward a place she knew, a crack in the earth, a trading post that was not on any white man's map. It was called El Nido, the nest. It was a collection of adobe huts and canvas tents huddled at the bottom of a deep arroyo, hidden from the wind and from casual eyes. It was run by a man named Silas. Silas was a man of many bloods and no allegiances. He had a face like a dried apple, skin the color of old leather, and eyes that saw everything and judged nothing. He traded with soldiers, with bounty hunters, with settlers, and with the people. He took dollars, gold, and furs. He sold whiskey, bullets, and, most importantly, silence. He was standing in the door of his main hut as they rode in, a long rifle cradled in his arm. He watched them, his expression unreadable. "Kiona," he said, a nod of his head. He looked at Hank, at the tattered blue uniform trousers. "You are keeping strange company." "He is with me," Kiona said. "We need supplies. We have this mule to trade." Silas looked at the mule, then at the two horses. He looked at Hank's rifle. "You have been busy. I heard Jed and his brother went looking for a deserter. I see they did not find him." "They found us," Hank said, his voice quiet. Silas grinned, a brown, broken-toothed expression. "And you are here, and they are not. Good. I never liked Jed. He cheated at cards. Come inside." The inside of his hut was dark and cool, and smelled of tobacco, coffee, and dust. It was crammed with goods. Sacks of flour, barrels of beans, bolts of cloth, boxes of cartridges. "I will take the mule and the gelding," Silas said. "Getting right to business?" "No," Kiona said. "Just the mule." "The mule and the soldier's rifle?" "No." Silas shrugged. "Then you do not get much. A little flour, 10 cartridges, a side of bacon, and I cannot let you stay. I have other customers." Before Kiona could argue, the sound of horses echoed down the arroyo. It was not one or two. It was a patrol. Silas's face went blank. "Damn!" He looked at Kiona, then at Hank. "Holloway's men. 6 of them. They come through every 2 weeks." "We have to hide," Hank said, his hand grabbing for a rifle he no longer had to bargain with. "Hide where in my pocket." Silas looked at Kiona. "This is bad for business. Very bad." "They are not looking for us," Kiona said, her voice low. "They are on a patrol. They will buy whiskey and leave." "Maybe, unless they see your paint mare. She is distinctive." "Silas," Kiona said, her voice dropping, and she spoke in her own language, a fast, urgent string of words. Hank watched as the old man's face softened. He argued, shaking his head. Kiona spoke again, more forcefully. "Finally." Silas sighed, a great, weary sound. "Fine, fine, for your mother's sake. But you owe me, both horses." "One," Kiona said. "The gelding." "Fine one now. Go, in the root cellar, and be silent. If they find you, I will say you snuck in. I will help them kill you." He pointed to a trap door behind a stack of furs. Hank pulled it open. It was a black, spider-filled hole that smelled of damp earth and rotting potatoes. "Go!" Silas hissed. Hank dropped into the darkness. Kiona followed, pulling the door closed over their heads. It was total blackness. The space was tiny, not much bigger than the shed at the fort, and crammed with sacks. They were pressed together, shoulder to shoulder. Kiona's back against his chest. He could feel her breathing, fast and shallow. Above them, they heard the heavy boots on the wood floor. They heard voices. The rough, loud talk of Holloway's men. They heard the clink of glasses. Hank was shaking. He was not just cold. This was terror. They were trapped. If they were found... I should have run," he whispered, his mouth close to her ear. He was not even aware he was speaking. "Be silent," she breathed back. "They will find us. We should have gone east, I told you, to the settlements." "And be in a cage right now," she hissed, her voice a thread of pure venom. "Waiting for a rope, you are a fool." "It is better than being shot in a hole," he whispered, his panic rising. "Is it?" she said. "For you, maybe. For me, it is just a different hole. At least here, I am free." He could feel the tension in her body, like a coiled spring. She was not just hiding. She was waiting. If that door opened, she would come out fighting. She would die, right here in a potato cellar, covered in dirt, and she would take him with her. He realized, with a sudden, sickening clarity, that he did not want to die. Not for her, not for her revenge. He was a farmer from Ohio. He wanted to live. He wanted to see a green field again. And he realized something else. He was looking at her. He saw her, this fierce, broken, beautiful woman. And he cared what happened to her. He cared desperately. He wanted her to live, too, but her path was all death. "Kiona," he whispered, "your way. It will kill you. It will kill us both." She did not answer. She had gone utterly still. The voices above them grew louder. Then there was laughter, and the sound of boots moving toward the door. The sound of them leaving. After a long, long silence, the trapdoor opened. Silas looked down at them, his face grim. "They are gone, but they will be back. One of them. He was asking about a paint mare. Someone saw you in the storm." They climbed out, blinking in the dim light. Kiona's face was a mask, but Hank saw the tremor in her hands. "You cannot stay," Silas said, "and you cannot go south. They are riding that way, and you cannot go east. The bounty hunters are thick as flies. You have to go west, into the high mountains. The Ute Pass. It is the only way.
The mountains.
Kiona said. It was not her plan. Her plan was south. Holloway was south. It is the only way, girl, Silas said, his voice softening. Or you will be dead by sundown. I will take the gelding. You take your mare and the supplies. Go, and do not come back. Kiona looked at Hank. He was pale, but he was steady. He was looking at her. A new, painful understanding in his eyes. He knew, just as she did, that the old man was right. She nodded once. She was a warrior. A warrior does not just fight. A warrior survives. And sometimes, survival meant running. She took the flour and the ammunition Silas offered. She was sacrificing her path, her mission, the clean, sharp line of her vengeance. She was doing it to keep this boy alive. She hated it. She hated him for it. They rode out of the arroyo, turning west, away from Holloway, away from her past, toward the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the high mountains. The feelings between them were stronger than ever, but they were not feelings of love. Not yet. It was a terrible, tangled knot of responsibility and resentment. She had saved his life, and in doing so, he had, perhaps, just cost her the only thing she had left to live for. Or, perhaps, he had just given her something else. The mountains were a purgatory of white and blue. The Ute Pass was a frozen, wind-scarred hell. They did not just flee into the high country, they were swallowed by it. The pursuit, the men who had seen the paint mare, faded behind them, lost to the snow and the sheer, brutal indifference of the high peaks. Survival became the only mission, the only thought, the only prayer. Winter locked them in. It was a winter that clawed at them, that tried to suck the marrow from their bones. The resentment that had simmered between them did not have the energy to burn. It was replaced by a grim, shared purpose. Stay alive. And a strange thing happened. Hank, the soft Ohio farm boy, did not die. He learned. He watched Kiona. He learned to be quiet, to move without disturbing the snow, to read the track of a snowshoe hare. He learned to set a snare with hands so numb they felt like wooden blocks. He learned to endure the cold, to sit for hours without moving, his rifle across his knees, watching, just watching. The softness was burned out of him. The farm boy was buried under layers of lean muscle and a new, hard-bitten patience. Kiona, in turn, was forced to rely on him. She was the expert in this world, but she was only one person. He became her hands when hers were busy skinning a small animal. He became her back, standing guard while she slept the light. Exhausted sleep of the hunted. He would sit, his blue coat long gone, replaced by a patchwork of rabbit skins and a stolen blanket, and he would watch her. He saw the way she woke, not with a start, but with a simple, quiet opening of her eyes. He saw the lines of pain around her mouth that were always there. He stopped talking about newspapers. She stopped talking about revenge. They talked about the weather, about the condition of Sparrow, about the lack of game. They existed. They shared the thin, stringy meat of a ptarmigan. They huddled under the same blankets. But this time, it was not the desperate, frantic collision of the rain. It was a shared, necessary warmth, a simple, profound reality. His body next to hers was the only anchor in a world of white. The winter broke. It cracked like a sheet of ice, and the first thin trickles of meltwater began to carve paths down the rock. The high meadows started to show patches of green, and with the thaw, the old conflict returned, but it had changed. It was Hank who found the trail, not an animal track, shod horses, at least a dozen, and wagons. Here, this high, it was impossible. "Where are they going?" he whispered. He had learned to whisper. Kiona knelt, studying the tracks. "They are not going through the pass. They are going into it. Into the rock." She pointed, high up, to a place where the mountains folded in on themselves. A canyon that looked like a shadow. A place no one would ever go. There. For 3 days. They tracked them. They moved like ghosts, high on the ridges, looking down. The wagons were not army wagons. They were heavy freight wagons, drawn by teams of 16 mules, and they were guarded by men in long dusters, Holloway's men. "He is not just using the fort," Hank said, his voice flat with a terrible understanding. "He is here. He is using the mountains." "This is Ute land," Kiona said, her voice a low growl. "Sacred land. He is trespassing." It was an understatement so profound it was almost a profanity. On the 3rd day, they found it. It was not a base. It was a fortress. It was built into a box canyon, a place the Ute called the Eagle's Nest. It was a secret, a place of high, sheer rock walls. Holloway had built a town. There were log barracks, a smithy, a huge, fortified storehouse, and a palisade wall at the narrow mouth of the canyon. It was invisible from any pass, from any trail. It was supplied by his own freight road, carved secretly through the high country. This was the heart of the spider's web. This was where the guns were. They watched from a ledge so high that the men below looked like ants. They watched for 2 days. They saw it all. They saw a delegation of Blackfoot warriors ride in, proud and hard. They saw them ride out, their pack horses loaded with new, dark shapes. Repeating rifles, they saw Holloway. He was not just a name on a paper. He was a man. He wore a fine coat. Even here, he was tall with a thick beard, and he walked like he owned the ground. Which, Kiona thought, he probably did. He was laughing, sharing a cigar with the Blackfoot chief. He was paying them, arming them, to start a war that would draw the cavalry south, a war that would clear the land for his ranches, his railroads. He was setting the whole territory on fire. "We have to stop them," Hank said. Kiona looked at him. His face was thin, bearded, his eyes hard. He was not the boy she had pulled from the fort. "We are 2 people," she said. "They are 50, 100. "I do not care," Hank said. "We saw it. We know. We cannot just ride away. This is not your fight, Kiona. This is everyone's." She looked at him. He had taken her quest for vengeance, a single, sharp stone, and made it into a mountain. He was right. This was bigger than Willow Creek. This was Willow Creek over and over, forever. "No," she said. "It is my fight. He is on my land." She looked at the fortress. "But you are right. We cannot ride in. We burn it." "Burn it? The storehouse, the guns, we burn it all." They had tools. They had the supplies from the bounty hunters. They had 2 packs of dynamite. It was a desperate, insane plan. It was the only plan they had. They waited for a new moon, a night so black it felt like they were moving through ink. They left Sparrow miles away. They came in on foot, over the rock wall. Not through the gate. They used her rope. They were 2 shadows, moving among shadows. The fortress was quiet. A few guards on the wall. A low murmur of voices from a building that glowed with lantern light. The saloon, Hank guessed. The storehouse was a massive, 2-story log structure in the center of the compound. Dark, silent. They reached it. The door was barred, with a heavy lock. "I cannot pick this one," Kiona whispered. "We do not have to," Hank said. He pointed up, a window, high up, for loading hay into a loft. "I will go. Give me the dynamite." "No, I will go. I am lighter." "You cannot pull me up after. I will go. I will light the fuse and drop it. You be ready to run. Get to the wall." "We run together." "Kiona, this is my part. I am not a killer. I am not a warrior. But I can be a fire." He tried to smile. It was a ghastly expression in the dark. She looked at him. This farm boy, this man. She nodded once. She gave him the dynamite. She gave him the fuse. He used her rope. He threw it, a perfect, silent cast, up and over a beam that stuck out. He climbed. He was no longer clumsy. He was strong, sure. He disappeared into the black square of the window. Kiona waited. The silence stretched. Her heart was a drum against her ribs. She was alone in the enemy camp. An eternity passed. 1 minute, 2. A shout, a single panicked yell from inside the storehouse. "Hey, who is—" A gunshot, a heavy booming pistol shot. Hank. Then all hell broke loose. A lantern flared inside. More shouts. An alarm bell began to clanging. A frantic, ugly sound. Kiona ran, not for the wall, but for the door of the storehouse. It was being unbarred from the inside. The door flew open. Hank stumbled out, clutching his side. He was not shot. He had been stabbed. A long, dark knife was still buried in his gut. He looked at Kiona, his face a mask of surprise. "It is lit," he gasped. "The fuse, it is lit." He fell to his knees. Kiona screamed. It was not a war cry. It was a sound of pure, primal loss. She ran to him. She grabbed him, pulling him up. "Hank, no." "Run!" He choked, blood on his lips. "Run, Kiona!" "Not without you, we go together." She put her arm around him, dragging him, his feet stumbling in the dirt. A rifle shot cracked. The bullet tore through the fleshy part of Kiona's shoulder. It felt like a hot iron. The force of it spun her around. And she fell, landing hard, Hank falling half on top of her. "Kiona, you are hit." Men were pouring out of the barracks. 20 of them, 30. They were running toward them. Hank looked at her, bleeding in the dirt. He looked at the storehouse, where a faint, orange glow was now visible from the open door. He looked at the men, leveling their rifles. He had a choice. He could run. He could leave her. He could maybe make it to the wall. He could save himself. The fuse was lit. The job was done. But Kiona was on the ground. She was trying to get up, trying to raise her pistol, but her arm would not obey. She was snarling like a wounded wolf, ready to die, ready to fight. "Go!" she hissed, her voice tight with pain. "The guns! Go!" Hank looked at her, at this fierce, impossible, broken woman, the woman who had saved him, the woman who had lain with him in the cold, the woman who was, he realized with a sudden, agonizing clarity, his entire world. The farm in Ohio was a ghost. Willow Creek was a ghost. The only real thing was this woman, bleeding in the dirt, telling him to save himself. He knew, in that instant, that he could not live without her. He would not. He did not run. He did not choose. He stood up. He grabbed Kiona by her good arm, pulling her to her feet, shoving her behind him. "Hank, what are you—" He put his body between her and the oncoming men. He raised his pistol. He did not have a plan. He was just a wall. He was the wall she would lean on. "I am not leaving you," he said, his voice hoarse. He fired his pistol. A man yelled. Kiona, her face white, slick with sweat, saw him. She saw this boy, this farmer, standing against an army. For her, he was going to die. He was going to die for her. The pain in her shoulder was a white fire, but her rage was a sun. No, she would not let him. She grabbed her knife. She stood up, stumbling, pushing past him. She would meet them. She would. A man rounded the corner, his rifle up, aimed not at her, but at Hank. He was the only one standing, the only real threat. Hank saw him. He turned, raising his pistol, but he was too slow. Kiona threw her knife, a single underhand, desperate throw. It struck the man in the chest. He stopped. He looked down, confused. He fell. "Kiona!" Hank screamed. He grabbed her as her legs buckled. "The fuse." He heard it, a fast, sputtering hiss. He did not think. He grabbed her, his arms like steel bands, and he dived, pulling her with him, behind a low watering trough, a heavy, thick-sided log. The world ended. The explosion was not a sound. It was a fist that struck the ground. The air, their bodies. The storehouse went up in a single, deafening, shattering roar. Wood, metal, rifles, and fire punched a hole in the night sky. The blast wave tore across the compound, picking up men, horses, and wagons, and throwing them like leaves. Hank felt the trough lift, felt it slam down on them, his body shielding Kiona's from the worst of the impact. Debris rained down, hot metal and splintered, burning wood. Then, silence, a high thin ringing in his ears, the smell of sulfur and smoke. He was alive. He was on top of her. He was alive. He pushed the wreckage of the trough off them. He rolled over, his own side, where the knife had been, screaming in agony. He had forgotten it. He looked at Kiona. She was limp beneath him. Her eyes were closed. Her face was as white as the high mountain snow. The wound in her shoulder was a dark, spreading stain. "Kiona," he whispered, his voice broken. "Kiona, please." He had stopped the war. He had burned the guns, and he had just lost the only thing in the world he had left. The ringing in Hank's ears was a high, thin scream, louder than the roar of the spreading fire. He was on his back, the sky a sickening orange, choked with smoke and embers. He was alive. He was in agony. The knife. He had forgotten the knife. He looked down. The handle was still there, a dark, impossible shape sticking out from his side, just below his ribs. He heard her groan. "Kiona." He rolled, a movement that sent a wave of pure, white-hot fire through his entire body. He pushed the heavy, splintered log of the water trough off her. She was lying on her stomach, her face in the dirt, her shoulder. He saw the dark, wet stain spreading across her back, the buckskin soaked and black with it. "Kiona," he whispered again, his voice a broken thing. He touched her, his hand shaking. "Kiona, wake up, please." She did not move. He had won. He had burned the guns. He had stopped the war, and in doing it, he had killed her. The thought was a stone, heavier and colder than any mountain, and it crushed what was left of his spirit. He had nothing. Well, this is a pathetic sight." The voice cut through the chaos. It was calm. It was civilized. It was full of a cold, amused fury. Hank looked up. Thomas Holloway was standing not 10 feet away. He was untouched. His long, wool coat was immaculate. His beard was neatly trimmed. He must have been in his cabin, a sturdy log building set apart from the others, far enough from the blast. He held a silver-plated pistol in his hand, and he was not even breathing hard. He looked at the burning storehouse, at the bodies of his men scattered across the compound, at the ruin of his entire secret enterprise. His face was calm, but his eyes were pits of fire. "You," Holloway said. He looked at Hank, a flicker of recognition, and then dismissal. He was just a tool. Then he looked at Kiona's unmoving form. That savage, she did this." "No," Hank choked out, pushing himself up onto one elbow. The movement made him gasp, and the world went gray at the edges. I did this." Holloway laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. You were just a clerk, Turner, a whey-faced boy from Ohio who was good with numbers. You could not do this. You do not have the spine." He gestured with his pistol at the inferno. This was an animal, but you let her in." He took a step closer, his gaze fixed on Hank. He saw the knife. He saw the blood. "And look at you. You let her kill you too. What a fool. A fool for a piece of red flesh." "She is not—" Hank could not find the words. He fumbled, trying to find his own pistol. But it was gone, lost in the blast. He was helpless. "It does not matter," Holloway said. He was all business now. He had lost millions. He had lost his war. He would have to start again. But first, he would clean up the mess. "You cost me, boy, more than you will ever know. I was fond of you. You wrote a good hand." He raised his pistol, aiming it not at Hank's head, but at his heart. He was going to take his time. "No." The voice was a whisper, a dry rustle of leaves. Kiona. She was moving. She was pushing herself up, her left arm, her good arm, trembling under her weight. Her face was as white as snow, streaked with soot and blood. The pain in her right shoulder was so vast, so blinding, that she could not feel her arm at all. It was just a dead, burning weight, but her eyes were alive. They were black coals, and they were fixed on Holloway.
"You,"
she hissed.
"Willow Creek."
Holloway turned. He looked at her, his amusement fading, replaced by a cold, appraising look. "Ah, so that is it, a personal matter. I was wondering. Willow Creek. Yes, that was necessary. Progress demands sacrifice. My dear, your people were in the way."
"You murdered my family?"
She was on one knee, swaying. "I built a nation," he snapped, his voice rising, the civilized mask cracking. "I am the man who tames this god-forsaken land, and you are the savages who would let it all go to waste. I did what I had to do, and now, I will do this." He turned his pistol, aiming it at her. She was the threat. She was the one with the fire. "No," Hank yelled. With a strength he did not know he possessed, he surged forward, not standing, but lunging from the ground, grabbing Holloway's ankles. It was a farm boy's tackle. Holloway cursed, surprised. He stumbled, his shot going wide, firing into the burning wreckage. He kicked at Hank, his boot connecting hard with Hank's wounded side. Hank screamed, a high, thin sound, and his grip broke. He fell back, his vision tunneling to a single point of light. "You insignificant gnat!" Holloway roared. He put the pistol to Hank's head. Hank could feel the cold, silver-plated metal against his temple. He closed his eyes. "Hank!" Kiona's voice. He opened his eyes. She was moving. She was not a warrior. She was not a woman. She was a force. She could not use her arm. Her knife was gone. Her pistol was gone. So she used her body. She launched herself from her kneeling position, a desperate, low tackle, just as he had done. She slammed into Holloway's legs. Holloway was ready this time. He did not fall. He just staggered, roaring in frustration. He raised his pistol to club her, but his balance was gone. And he was standing on the edge of the pit where the water trough had been, a shallow depression now slick with mud and blood and oil from the blast. His boot slipped. He went down. Kiona, and Hank, all in a desperate thrashing pile. Holloway was strong. He was a big man, and he was fighting for his life. He rolled, bringing his pistol up, trying to get it clear of the two of them. Kiona saw it. She was on top of him, her good arm a steel band, grabbing his wrist. She had his gun hand. Holloway snarled, "You bitch!" He slammed his free fist into her wounded shoulder. Kiona screamed, a sound of such pure, unadulterated agony that it made Hank's blood freeze. Her grip slipped. Holloway was free. He was pushing her off, raising the pistol, the barrel just inches from her face. "Now, you die, and you watch." He was looking at her, but he was talking to Hank. Hank was dying. He knew it. The blackness was closing in, but he saw Kiona's face, her eyes wide, staring at the gun barrel. He saw her, fighting for him, after he had failed. He was not a warrior. He was not a killer. He was a farmer. He was a clerk. He was hers. With his last, final, impossible ounce of strength. He did not reach for a weapon. He reached for the knife, the one still buried in his own gut. He grabbed the handle. He pulled. The sound was not a sound. It was a feeling, a wet, tearing, final surrender. The pain was... It was not pain. It was release. It was everything. He pulled the long, bloody 9-inch blade free of his own body. Holloway was still savoring his moment, his finger tightening on the trigger, his eyes locked with Kiona's. Hank rolled onto his side. He raised the knife, and he drove it, with all the weight of his body, all the pain of his life, all the love he had just discovered, deep into Thomas Holloway's side, just under the ribs. Holloway froze. The shot did not come. His body went rigid, his eyes wide with a profound, uncomprehending shock, swiveled from Kiona. He looked down, at Hank, at the boy, the clerk.
You,
he whispered. Hank did not answer. He just collapsed, his hand still on the knife. Holloway fell sideways. He did not make a sound. His silver pistol dropped from his nerveless fingers into the mud. He was dead. The silence that fell was deafening. There was only the roar of the fire, the pop and crackle of burning logs. The surviving men, seeing their leader fall, seeing the two things that had done it, had fled. They had melted into the night, running from the burning, haunted fortress. It was over. Hank lay on his back, the sky spinning above him. The gaping open wound in his side was pumping, a dark, slow, steady rhythm. Kiona. He turned his head. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She was there. She was crawling. She was dragging herself through the mud, her right arm useless, her face a mask of blood and tears and soot. It was the first time he had ever seen her cry. She collapsed beside him, her good arm fumbling, reaching, finding his hand.
soldier,
She whispered, her voice broken. Kiona, he breathed. He tried to smile. Blood filled his mouth. We did it. Your family.
No,
She said, her voice fierce, her tears cutting clean paths through the grime on her cheeks.
not mine. Ours. You.
She could not find the words. She put her head down on his chest, her ear pressed over his heart. It was beating. Faint, slow, but it was beating.
You are alive.
She sobbed, her body shaking. So are you, he whispered. His hand, the one she was not holding, coming up, his fingers brushing her hair. You are so beautiful. She held him, her good arm wrapped around his neck, her face buried in his chest. He held her, his hand tangled in her hair. They lay in the mud, in the center of the inferno they had created. Two broken, bleeding, victorious souls. They had faced the man who had destroyed her past, and the man who had represented his, and together, in a tangle of blood and sacrifice, they had found a future. If they could only live to see it. The fire was their only light, and their only shield. For a long, ragged moment, there was nothing but the sound of the inferno, the collapsing timbers of the storehouse, and the ragged, wet sound of two people trying to breathe. Kiona's tears were hot on Hank's chest. They were the first tears she had shed since Willow Creek. They were not for her family. They were for him.
You fool!
She sobbed, her one good hand gripping his shirt, slick with his blood.
You stupid farm boy!
Kiona, he whispered. His hand was still in her hair. His grip was weak. The blackness was pressing in. A heavy, comfortable blanket.
I think I am done.
Her head snapped up. The tears stopped. The warrior, the survivor, the woman who had lived for 10 moons on nothing but grief and hate, stared into his fading eyes. The hate was gone. The grief was still there, but it had a new, terrible, sharp edge. No, she said, Her voice was not a sob. It was an order. You do not die. I do not allow it. She looked at his side. It was not a wound. It was a hole, a black, gaping mouth that was spilling his life into the mud. She looked at her own shoulder. It was a searing, white-hot agony, her arm completely useless, a dead weight. Holloway was dead. His fortress was a funeral pyre, but they were in the middle of it. We go, she said.
Kiona, leave me. I am so tired.
He tried to smile.
Save yourself. It is finished.
It is not, she snarled. She grabbed the front of his shirt with her left hand, her one good hand.
You stood for me. Now, I pull. You will help.
She tried to stand. The pain in her shoulder almost made her faint, but she locked her knees, pushing herself up, her boots slipping in the bloody mud. She was on her feet, swaying. She pulled at him. He was a dead weight.
Hank, help me,
she screamed, her voice raw. He heard her through the fog. He heard her voice, the first voice that had ever truly mattered. He opened his eyes. He saw her, one-armed, bleeding, her face a mask of terrible resolve. He could not let her do this alone. He put his hands flat on the ground. He pushed. A sound, half groan, half scream, was torn from his throat. He got to his knees. The world spun.
Good,
she breathed.
Good.
She got her shoulder under his arm, his good side. She took his weight. She was strong, but he was a full-grown man, and she was badly wounded. It was a nightmare. They were two broken halves, leaning on each other, a grotesque three-legged creature. Now, walk, she commanded. They stumbled away from the fire, away from the body of Thomas Holloway, which was already being licked by the encroaching flames. They moved through the smoke. The compound was empty. The survivors had fled. They had left everything. Where? Hank gasped. Sparrow, the wall, where we left the rope. It was 100 yards. It felt like 100 miles. Every step was a fresh agony for them both. Hank's boots left a thick, dark trail. He was not just bleeding. He was leaking. Kiona could feel the hot, wet soak of it against her own side.
Just a little more,
she whispered, her voice no longer a command, but a plea.
Do not leave me, not now.
He did not answer. He just moved his feet, one, then the other. His entire world had shrunk to that single, simple, impossible task. They reached the wall. The rope was still there, a dark snake against the logs, illuminated by the orange glow of the burning fortress.
The horse,
Kiona said.
She is in the rocks, just over.
I cannot climb, Hank whispered. His legs gave out. He slid down the wall, leaving a long smear, and collapsed at its base.
I am done, Kiona, truly.
No, she fell to her knees beside him.
Hank.
His eyes were closed. His breathing was a shallow, wet rattle. She looked at his face. So pale in the firelight, the face of the boy who had brought her water, the face of the man who had stood between her and a bullet, the face of the man who had pulled a knife from his own body to save hers. Her vengeance was complete. Holloway was dead. Her family was avenged, but the stone in her belly was still there. It had just changed its name. It was no longer hate. It was terror.
You will not die,
she said to his unconscious face.
I crossed this land to kill a man. I will cross it again to save one.
She stood up. Her shoulder screamed. She ignored it. She looked at the rope. She looked at him. She tied the rope around his chest, under his arms, with her one good hand, her fingers and teeth working the knot. It was clumsy, but it was strong. She looped the other end over a high log, and she pulled. She pulled with her left arm, her legs, her back, her entire body. She wrapped the rope, pulled, held it with her body, wrapped it again. He was a dead weight. She was a single, focused point of will. The muscles in her arm and back felt like they were tearing. The pain in her shoulder was a solid, blinding sheet of white. But he moved. Inch by inch. She raised him. He scraped against the rough logs. She hauled, her breath hissing between her teeth. He was at the top. She tied off the rope, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip it. She climbed, one-handed. She climbed the rope, her feet finding purchase, her good arm burning with a fire that almost matched his wound. She got to the top, breathing like a winded animal. She untied him. He was draped over the log wall, a broken doll. She pushed him. He fell, a heavy, limp splash, into the snowmelt and mud on the other side. Kiona did not climb down. She fell, landing hard, jarring her shoulder. She cried out, a short, sharp sound. She did not care. She crawled to him. He was still breathing. She found Sparrow. The mare was terrified, her eyes white, but she had not bolted. Kiona spoke to her, low and urgent. The mare, sensing the desperation, the blood, quieted. Getting him on the horse was the last impossibility. He was unconscious. She was one-armed. She could not lift him. She used the horse, she used the land. She dragged him, her heels digging in, to a low rock. She pulled Sparrow alongside, her good hand twisted in the mare's mane.
Come on, help me, she whispered to the horse. To Hank, to the gods she no longer believed in. She pulled, she heaved. She got his upper body onto the saddle. He slid off. She did it again. She was sobbing, not with grief, but with sheer, animalistic effort. She got him halfway over. She put her shoulder, her good shoulder, under his hip and shoved. He was draped, face down, over the saddle, like a fresh-killed deer. She climbed up behind him, her own movement stiff and slow. She settled in, pulling his dead weight back against her chest. She wrapped her one good arm around him, holding him in place. Her other arm, her right arm, was a useless, agonizing thing. She let it hang. She kicked Sparrow into a walk. They left the fortress, a burning monument to one man's greed and their shared sacrifice, and disappeared back into the high, cold darkness of the mountains. The world they left behind was in chaos. Holloway's men were scattered, leaderless. The linchpin of the entire territory's unrest was gone. The gun-running operation was shattered, its heart a smoking crater. The Blackfoot would not get their rifles. The army would not have its new war. The settlers would, for a time, be safe, and they would never even know the names of the two broken people who had saved them. The journey was a blur of gray pain. Hank was in a deep fever. He floated, his mind a red fog. He dreamed. He was on the farm in Ohio. The sun was warm. He was walking, but his side, it was not right. He saw his mother, but when she turned, it was Kiona's face. She was bleeding from the shoulder. You must fix the fence, Hank, she said. He saw the sergeant, his face sneering. But when he opened his mouth, Holloway's voice came out. Progress demands sacrifice. Kiona rode. She did not sleep. She rode with one arm, holding him to her. She was a warrior. She knew this land, but she was not a healer. Not for a wound like this. The knife had gone deep. It had torn his insides. He was dying. She knew the signs, the cold sweat, the smell of his breath. She had to take him to help. But where not Silas? He could not fix this. Not a white town. They would hang him as a deserter. They would hang her as a killer. There was only one place. She turned Sparrow north, back toward the high, lost valleys, back toward Willow Creek. Not to the ashes, but to the hills above it, to the place the survivors, the last remnants of her people, were hiding. It was a terrible choice, to bring this man, this white man, this soldier, to the very people who had been slaughtered by his kind. They would kill him. They might kill her for bringing him,
She looked down at his face, pale and still, resting against her arm. His breath was a faint puff against her skin. He had stood for her. He had died for her. No, he was not dying. She would stand for him. It took 2 days. 2 days of her own agony. Her shoulder on fire, her body weak from blood loss. 2 days of listening to his breathing grow shallower, his fever hotter. On the evening of the 2nd day, she rode into a hidden box canyon. It was a place a white man would never find. A dozen lodges, hidden among the aspen. A dog barked. Men emerged, their faces hard. They were the last warriors of the silent arrow. They saw her. "Kiona!" a man shouted. It was her cousin. His face, hard as rock, broke into disbelief. "Joy! You live!" They surrounded her, hands reaching up. Then they saw the man she was holding. The joy vanished. It was replaced by a cold, hard silence. Their faces became the stone masks she knew so well. "A white man." Her cousin snarled. "A soldier." He raised his rifle. "You bring this to us." Kiona slid from the horse. Her legs almost buckled, but she stood. She stood between her cousin's rifle and the man on the horse. "He is not a soldier," she said, her voice hoarse but clear. It carried in the cold, mountain air. "He is Hank." "He is the enemy," another man said, his face scarred. "He is mine," Kiona said. The word was a shield. "He fought with me. He bled with me." She looked at all of them, the faces of the people she had lost, the people she had found. "He killed Thomas Holloway." A silence. The name Holloway was a curse. "He killed the man who paid for Willow Creek. He burned the guns. He did this for us." She touched her own bleeding shoulder. "He stood for me." She looked at the man on the horse. "And he is dying. He is dying because of me, because of us." She turned to an old woman, her face a map of wrinkles, who had emerged from the largest lodge, Stone Woman, the healer, the one who had taught her. "Help him," Kiona said. It was not a request. It was a demand. Stone Woman looked at Hank, at his pale, dying face. She looked at Kiona, bleeding, one-armed, but burning with a fire that was hotter than any fortress. She saw the truth. She saw that the girl who had left, the warrior bent on revenge, was gone. This was a woman, bent on saving a life. "His spirit is, almost gone," Stone Woman said, her voice like dry leaves. "Then bring it back," Kiona said. She swayed, the blackness finally rising up to claim her. "He is my family. You help him, or you will bury us both, here, on this ground." She collapsed in the dirt, her good arm still stretched out, her fingers just brushing the boot of the man she had carried home. Kiona woke to the smell of pine smoke and bitter herbs. Her first thought was pain. Her right arm felt like it was submerged in a bucket of hot coals, a deep, throbbing, immense agony that seemed to fill the entire world. Her second thought was Hank. She was in a lodge, not her own. It was dim, the light filtering through the stretched hides of the roof. She was lying on a soft buffalo robe. She tried to sit up. "Be still, child." The voice was like dry leaves rustling. Stone Woman. The old healer was sitting by a small, smoldering fire, grinding something in a stone bowl. Kiona's voice was a dry crackle. Her throat was raw. "He breathes," Stone Woman said, not looking up. "Which is more than he deserves, or perhaps more than you deserve. I have not decided." Kiona pushed herself up onto her good elbow. Her left elbow. The movement sent a wave of sickness and pain through her that almost made her black out again. She saw him. He was on the other side of the small fire. He was lying on a pallet, as still as death, his face a pale, waxy gray under his new beard. His chest was bare. Stone Woman had cut away his clothes. He was covered in a poultice of dark leaves and mud, but she could see the angry, stitched gash in his side. It was a terrible, jagged, puckered thing. He pulled the knife out. Kiona whispered,
"He is a fool."
Stone Woman agreed.
"A white man's fool. He tore his own insides. He should be dead."
"But he is not." "No, not yet. The fever is in him. It is a strong fire. It will burn him up, or it will cleanse him. We will know by the new moon." Kiona looked at her own shoulder. It was tightly bound in clean deer hide.
"You helped us." "I helped you," the old woman corrected.
"You are blood. You are the daughter of my sister. Him." She gestured to Hank with her chin. "I work on him because you, in your foolishness, have tied your spirit to his. If he dies, a part of you will die, and you are too broken already." Kiona sank back, exhausted. The relief was so profound it was almost as painful as her shoulder. He was alive. They were safe. She had brought him home, and they had not killed him. She slept, but it was not sleep. It was a long, gray twilight of pain and broth, and the low, constant sound of Stone Woman's chanting. Days blurred. She would wake, drink the bitter tea the old woman forced on her, and look at Hank. He never moved. He just burned. He would cry out, his voice thick, talking of things she did not understand. Ohio, a sergeant, green fields. He would call for his mother, and once he called for her. "Kiona, the fire, run." In those moments, she would drag herself from her pallet, her good arm shaking, and go to him. She would put a wet cloth on his forehead, just as she had seen her own mother do for her brother. "I am here," she would whisper, her voice rough. "Be still. You are safe." She did not know if he heard her. Her cousin, Blackhawk, came to the lodge once. He stood in the doorway, his face a mask of thunder. "He still lives," he stated. "He lives." Kiona said. She was sitting up, her back against a lodge pole. Her strength was returning, but her right arm was a useless, heavy weight in its sling. "This is wrong," Blackhawk said. "He is the uniform. He is the man who did—" He could not say the name. "Willow Creek." "He is not," Kiona said, her voice quiet, but with an edge of steel that made him pause. "He was a boy, just like you were. Before this, he was a boy who saw what was wrong and he stood up. He stood for me, when he had no reason to." "He is white," Blackhawk insisted. "He is a man," Kiona countered. "He bleeds. He loves." The word felt strange in her mouth. "He killed Holloway. That is more than any of us did. We just ran. He fought. He fought for you, not for us." "It is the same," she said. "Now leave. You disturb the healing." He left. She knew the fight was not over, but she had won the first part. On the 10th day, the fever broke. Kiona was asleep, her head fallen forward onto her chest. A sound woke her, a cough. She looked. Hank's eyes were open. They were not the wild, feverish eyes of the past week. They were clear, and they were looking right at her. He said nothing. She said nothing. They just stared at each other across the small, smoky lodge. He looked at her face, which was thinner, her arm in the sling. She looked at him, at his face, hollowed out by the fever, the beard thick on his cheeks. "You lived," he finally whispered. His voice was a dry scrape. "You are a fool," she said. It was the first thing she could think of. A stupid, soft, farm boy fool. A small, painful smile cracked his dry lips. "You said that?" "I said it again." She got up, her movements still stiff, and brought him water in a cup. She lifted his head with her good arm, gently, and held it to his lips. He drank, his throat working. It was the most intimate thing she had ever done. "Where?" he asked, looking at the hide roof. "Home," she said. "My home. The place we have been hiding. The last place." His eyes widened in fear.
"But they will kill me."
"No," she said. "They are angry, but they will not kill you. I told them. You are mine." He processed this. He looked at her arm. "Your shoulder?"
"A bullet," she said. "It passed through. Stone Woman says. She says the muscle is torn. It will heal, but it will not be the same. I will not draw a bow again, not with strength."
The warrior was gone. The words hung in the air between them. The Kiona who had found him, the hunter, the fighter, was broken. He reached out, his hands shaking, and his fingers brushed the sling.
"I am sorry."
"Do not be," she said, pulling away.
"It is done. Now
you must heal. The wound, it is bad." "I know," he said. He looked down at his own stitched side. I remember I pulled it out."
"You did,"
she said, her voice flat.
"Cana, I saw Holloway. I killed him." "No,"
she said. She sat back on her heels.
"I threw the knife. You were standing for me."
"No," he whispered, a new, terrible understanding dawning.
I remember. The knife was in me. Oh, God."
He closed his eyes, the memory rushing back. The roll, the pull, the end of everything. "I killed him. I killed him."
"Yes," she said. He began to weep.
Not loud sobs, just silent, agonizing tears that ran from the corners of his eyes into his hair. He had taken a life. He had crossed a line he never thought he would cross. The farm boy was gone, too. Kiona watched him. She did not comfort him. She did not know how. She just watched. She had seen men die. She had seen men kill. She had never seen a man weep for it. The healing was slow. It was a new, strange life. The high hidden valley was full of ghosts, the remnants of her people. There were only 30 of them. Old men, women, a few children, and the young, angry warriors like Blackhawk. They were a tribe on the edge of extinction, and they had just adopted a broken white soldier. Hank's place was difficult. He was the enemy. He was the ghost of Willow Creek, walking among them. The children stared at him, half in fear, half in curiosity. The warriors, like Blackhawk, ignored him, their shoulders turned, their silence a heavy, constant rejection. But Kiona had spoken, and Kiona was not just a warrior. She was the one who had brought the news of Holloway's death. She was a hero, and he was her property. It was the only way they could understand it. He belonged to her. As he regained his strength, he learned his place. He was weak. His wound ached constantly. He could not hunt. He could not fight. He realized, useless. He was a mouth to feed, a burden. "You must let me go," he said to Kiona one evening. They were sitting outside their lodge. It was summer, the aspens green and rustling. He had his own pallet, but they shared her fire. She was working on a snare, her left hand quick and sure, her right arm hanging, still mostly useless, at her side. "Go where, soldier?" "I do not know. South, to a town. I cannot stay here. They hate me. I am not one of you." "You are right," she said, not looking up. "You are not. You are white. You are soft. You are loud when you walk. You know nothing." His face flushed. "Then let me go." "And you will go where back to the army they will hang you. Hank, you are a deserter. You are a wanted man.
I will find a new place. California, Oregon. I will change my name.
You will be dead in a week, she said flatly. You cannot hunt. You cannot even skin a rabbit. Silas, he will not help you. He is afraid. You have nowhere. You are like us. You are a ghost. You have no tribe. He sat there, the truth of her words washing over him. He had no home. Ohio was a dream. The army was a nightmare. He was nothing. So I stay here, he said, his voice bitter. You're a pet, the white man you saved. I eat your food. I do nothing. You are not a pet, she said, and her voice softened. Just a fraction. You breathe. You are here. That is not nothing, not to me. She finally looked at him. But you are right. You are useless. She stood up. Come. She took him to Stone Woman. The old healer was tending her garden, a small patch of green on the mountainside. He needs work, Kiona announced. Stone Woman looked at Hank, at his pale skin, his awkward, thin body. He is a man. He cannot dig roots. He is not a hunter, Kiona said. His arm is weak. His insides are torn. He is not strong, but he is not stupid. Hank stood there, humiliated, as the two women discussed him like a lame horse. What can you do? Stone Woman asked him directly. I am good with numbers. I can build things on the farm. I built the fences. I built the new corn crib. Build, the old woman said, as if testing the word. She pointed to her own lodge, where the winter snows had broken one of the main poles. Fix? It was a start. It was a test. Hank fixed it. He was a farmer. He knew wood. He knew leverage. He was clumsy at first, his side aching, but he worked. He cut a new aspen. He trimmed it. He, with the help of two of the women, reset the lodge pole. It was strong. He fixed the spring house. He built a new, stronger corral for the few horses they had. He worked. He was quiet. He was respectful. He asked for nothing. He just worked. The children stopped being afraid. They would watch him, this strange, quiet white man. He carved them toys, a small wooden horse, a bird. Black Hawk watched him. The hatred was still there, but it was confused. This was not the enemy. This was not a monster. This was just a man who was good with an axe, a man who was mending their broken world. And Kiona watched him. She saw the strength return to his arms. She saw the sun darken his skin. She saw the farm boy, the soft, clumsy fool, disappear. In his place was a man, a quiet, steady man, who carried his own scars. The wound on his side was a puckered, ugly thing. He would never be truly strong again. Her shoulder healed, but she was right. She could not draw her bow. She had lost her warrior's path. They were two broken people, living among a broken people. One night, they sat by the fire. It was late summer, the air cool. He was carving. She was braiding a rope. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It was comfortable. You saved my life, he said quietly, not looking up from his work. You saved mine, she replied. Twice, 3 times. I stopped counting. He put down his knife. Why? Kiona, that night, at the fort. Why? Why did you come back for me? Why pull me from the shed? Why not just run? She looked at the fire. You brought me water. You stopped the sergeant. You were not like the others. That is not a reason to die for someone. No, she said. She looked at him. That night, in the rain,
When we were cold."
He went still. I remember.
You touched my scar,"
she said, her voice a whisper.
You did not turn away. You saw me. Not the savage, not the warrior, just me. No one has seen me, not since Willow Creek."
"I see you," he said. "And I see you." He was no longer the blue coat. He was Hank. He was the man with the sad eyes who had been trapped. He was the man who had wept because he had killed, even to save them. He moved. He crossed the small space between their pallets. He sat beside her. He did not touch her. Not yet. "I cannot go back," he said. "I do not have a world any more."
This is your world," she said. "If you want it."
"I do," he said. I want you." He touched her then. His hand, calloused from the axe, not the rifle, cupped her face. He touched her as if she were something precious, something he was afraid to break. She leaned into his touch, the stone in her belly, the one that had been there for so long, the one that had been her only companion. It was gone. She was hollow, and he was filling her.
"I am broken,"
she whispered, turning her face, showing him her bad shoulder.
"I am not a warrior."
"Good," he whispered back.
"I am not a soldier. I am a farmer."
He put his other hand on his own scarred side. We are just people, scars and all." He kissed her. It was not the desperate, savage kiss of the storm. It was not a collision. It was a discovery. It was slow. It was warm. It was, for the first time in either of their lives, peace. They were not running. They were not fighting. They were just home. The smoke from the fire was a prayer, thin and white in the clear, cold air of the high valley. The lodge was no longer a hospital. It was a home. The healing had been a long, slow season, a time of quiet patience that neither Hank nor Kiona had known they possessed. It was a time of small, painful victories. Hank learned to walk again. His hand pressed against the jagged, puckered scar on his side. The wound had closed, but it had taken something from him. He would never be a man of great physical strength. The farm boy who could lift a hay bale was gone, replaced by a man who moved with a careful, deliberate grace, a man who understood his own limits. Kiona's shoulder healed, but it was, as Stone Woman had predicted, a new and different arm. The fire of the bullet had seared the muscle, and the long, agonizing recovery had left it stiff, the joint locked in a new, more limited range. She could lift, she could carry, but she could not draw her bow. The strength, the fluid, perfect power of the warrior was gone. She had to learn to tie knots with her left hand. She had to learn to dress herself with a new, frustrating clumsiness. They were two new people, inhabiting the ghosts of their old selves. The soldier was gone. The warrior was gone. In their place was a wounded farmer and a one-armed woman. And in the quiet moments of the smoky lodge, they were simply Kiona and Hank. Their shared pallets were close, the space between them gone. In the night, when the cold of the high mountains seeped through the hides, he would wake from a nightmare of falling. His hand clutching his side, he would find her hand, her good left hand, already there, waiting for him. Her own nightmares, of smoke and bugles and the screams of her family, were quieter now, but they still came. When they did, she would find him awake, his eyes on her, his presence a silent, steady anchor in the dark. Their world was this valley. It was a tribe of ghosts, 30 souls where there had once been thousands. They were the last of the Silent Arrow. A band of elders, widows, a few children, and the young, angry men like Black Hawk. And Hank, His presence was a constant, unspoken question. He was not one of them. He was white. He was the uniform. He was the enemy who had saved them. Blackhawk, Kiona's cousin, was the heart of this conflict. He watched Hank with a cold, unforgiving eye. He had accepted Kiona's word that Holloway was dead, that the fortress was ashes, but he could not, would not, accept the man. One day, Hank was working. It was what he did. He could not hunt. He could not fight. So he was repairing the small fish weir in the creek, his movement slow, his side obviously paining him as he lifted the heavy, wet stones. He was patient. He was just working. Blackhawk stood on the bank, his arms crossed. His own shadow fell across Hank. "You work hard," Blackhawk said. The words were not a compliment. They were an accusation. For a white man. Hank did not stop. He settled a large rock into place, the mud and cold water sluicing over his hands. "The weir is broken. The people need to eat." "You are not the people," Blackhawk snarled, his hand moving to the knife on his hip. "You are a stain. You are the man who wears the blue." Hank stopped. He stood up slowly, the cold water dripping from his trousers. He was thin, his face bearded, his eyes older. He was not the boy from the fort. I was that man," he said, his voice quiet. "I am not anymore. I am just Hank." "You are a ghost," Blackhawk said. "You do not belong here." "He belongs to me." Kiona's voice, she came from the trees, silent as always. Sparrow, her mare, was behind her. She had a basket of roots on her good arm. Her right arm, the wounded one, was held close to her body. She was not a warrior. She was a woman, providing. She stood between them. "He belongs to me, cousin, and I belong here. That is the end of it." "Kiona," Blackhawk pleaded, his anger shifting to confusion. "He is one of them. He is the reason we are here, the reason they are not." He gestured to the empty valley, to the ghosts of Willow Creek. "No," Kiona said. Her voice was flat, final. "He is the reason the man who did this is dead. He is the reason the guns are burned. He is a broken man, in a broken tribe, just like us." She looked at Hank, at his scarred side. Then she looked at her own useless arm. We all are broken, but we are here. We are alive." She looked at Blackhawk. "The past is ashes. It is gone. We cannot feed the children on hate. He is building a weir. He is building a future. You are just standing on the bank, remembering the anger." Blackhawk looked at Hank. He saw the scars. He saw the quiet patience. He saw the man who had asked for nothing, the man who had not tried to be one of them, but had simply helped. He saw the man Kiona had chosen. He turned, his face a mask of conflict, and he walked away. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a truce. It was an understanding. The war was over. The hard, slow, bitter peace had begun. The snows melted. The summer came, high and green and full of flowers. The valley was safe. Holloway's empire had shattered. The gun running was finished. The territory was quiet. The army, confused, leaderless, had pulled back. The war they had been promised, the one Holloway had tried to start, had never happened. When Hank was strong enough to ride his own horse, a quiet gelding, Kiona said, "We ride." She did not say where. He did not ask. He just followed. They rode for 2 days, down out of the high secret valley. They rode past the burned-out shell of Holloway's fortress, now just a black scar on the mountainside. They rode past the Badlands. They rode, and Hank knew where they were going. She led him to Willow Creek. The valley was green. The grasses were high. The creek was full and loud. Wildflowers, yellow and purple, covered the places where the lodges had been. The ashes were gone, washed away by the winter, reclaimed by the earth. It was just a valley, a beautiful, empty, terribly quiet valley. Kiona slid from Sparrow. She stood, her good arm at her side, her bad arm held across her stomach. She just stood. She was not looking for ghosts. She was just looking. Hank stayed back. He sat on his horse, a silent witness. This was her ground. This was her Gethsemane. He would not intrude. She walked to the center of where the village had been, near the creek. She knelt. She touched the earth, the rich, new grass. She stood and looked at the sky. She was not weeping. After a long, long time, she turned. She looked at him. He was just there, waiting.
I thought killing him would,
she said, her voice quiet.
I thought it would make this stop, the hurt here.
She touched her chest. It does not, Hank said, his voice rough. No, she said, it does not, but it is quieter. The ghosts, they are quieter. Kiona!
I came here to die,
she whispered. My life, it ended here. I was just a long, cold vengeance. I did not have a future. I did not want one. She walked back to him. She looked up at him. This strange man, this white man, this enemy.
You were a fool, she said.
I know, he smiled, a small, sad smile. You were clumsy and soft, and you talked too much.
I know that, too.
You should have run, she said. When I told you to, in the fortress, you should have saved yourself. I could not, he said. Why? Because you were my future, Kiona. I did not have one either. I was a ghost, just like you. I was just running until I met you, and then I was running to something. She looked at him, at this man who had stood for her, at this man who had seen her, all of her, the broken, the savage, the woman.
He is gone,
she said, looking back at the valley.
Holloway, the hate, it is finished.
She turned her eyes back to Hank.
And I am still here, the stone in my heart. It is gone.
She had faced her past, and he had been there. He had not offered words. He had not offered comfort. He had just been there, her witness, her anchor. She was no longer running. She put her hand, her good left hand, on his knee. Take me home, Hank. He reached down, and for the first time, he helped her mount her own horse. They sat on the ridge above their hidden valley. The sun was a huge, red ball, bleeding color into the western sky, painting the high, snow-capped peaks in shades of orange and deep, impossible purple. The air was cool, smelling of pine and the promise of night. Sparrow and the gelding grazed peacefully behind them. It is beautiful, Hank said. He was sitting on a log. Kiona was beside him, her shoulder touching his. It is home, she replied. He looked at the valley below, at the small, quiet lodges, at the smoke rising, at the children, a new generation, playing by the creek. It is a good place. We can plant next spring, down by the water, corn, beans. We can make this place Good. He was a farmer. His hands, though scarred, knew the earth. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Kiona said. She looked at her own hands. One, calloused and strong. The other, pale and stiff. I am not a warrior anymore. No, he said quietly. You are not. I cannot fight. Good, he whispered. I do not want to fight any more. He put his arm, his good arm, around her shoulders. You do not have to fight. Kiona, you are safe. She looked at him. She had never been safe. Her entire life had been a fight. First to live, then for revenge. Now, safe. She tried the word. It was foreign. I will be your arm, he said, his voice thick. And you will be my heart. She leaned her head against his shoulder. His good shoulder. He leaned his head against hers. They were not whole. They were two jagged pieces, scarred and broken. But they fit, they made a new whole. Kiona, the last warrior, had found her strength. It was not in her arm. It was not in her hate. It was in her survival. It was in her love. Hank, the lost soldier, had found his purpose. It was not in a uniform. It was not in a battle. It was in this valley. It was in this woman. The past was a shadow, a story that would be whispered around their fire. The ghosts of Willow Creek and of the fortress would always be there. Scars. Scars do not fade. They just become a part of you. But they were not running. They were not hiding. They were, at last, home. Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to Wild West Tales, like this video, and give us a little extra support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this tale.